I'm Rickey Jasper, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. After getting laid off 2 times in 6 months, I realized I had to be chasing a greater vision in my life. I had to be walking into my calling. I spent time building up a successful fitness apparel business, and then now stepping back in front of camera to talk, to speak more, to hopefully inspire you to chase a greater vision in your life. And my goal with this podcast is for us to do it together, so let's make it happen. Welcome back to the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Jasper. Today's topic is just be better. I'm going to walk you through 4 tips of how to take better personal responsibility to be a better person overall. I really like this because personal responsibility is everything. Responsibility is your ability to respond. That could be to respond to positive situations. That could be respond to negative situations. We have quote unquote situations that happen all the time throughout the day. So in order to be better, we just have to take better responsibility. So for our head and heart hits segment today, we actually have an author. So if you are new to this podcast, our head and heart hits are what hit me in the head made me think logically, and what hit me in the heart made me feel a certain way. We have an author today, like I said, it's Corey Muscara, and he actually got this quote from a monk that he interviewed who meditated for 15 hours, which is crazy, but people do it, and it's awesome. It's who you are is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Again, on this quote, I'm sure that this has been said for many, many years in the past, but from a head perspective, who you are is not your fault. It's not, when you came onto this earth, you didn't choose to. Your parents chose to have you. You came on the earth. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility, because once you have some autonomy, you have to make decisions. You are given responsibility to make decisions. How it made me feel was so many areas in my life, I just played the victim because I was like, this is somebody else's fault. It's not my responsibility. Therefore, I'm going to wash my hands of it. And I would still wonder why there were so many negative impacts in my life. I'll walk through those a little bit more as we get into tips and just be a lot more open and vulnerable and transparent about it. But who you are, the positive, negative things that happen to you growing up, it's not your fault. But in areas that you have control over, it is your responsibility if you want to be a better person. And again, that's a big if. Not everybody wants to be better. Not everybody wants to do the hard work, the growth work. And that's okay, because if it's whatever makes you happy, but if you want to be better, it's going to happen through a level of growth because you are taking the responsibility for things that weren't your fault. And that is the toughest pill to swallow. So the 4 tips that we're getting into today. Number 1, you're holding the ball. So I work for a tech company, and there was something that I did not feel was my responsibility to do. It wasn't communicated clearly. It didn't seem like it was on my plate. But then when the deadline hit and passed, there was backlash on me for it. Now I had a conversation with the CEO, and we were having a conversation. And the one thing that he said was, at the end of the day, if there's a single ball that's going around this organization and it's in your hand, even if you don't know necessarily why it's in your hand, you have to do something with it, because after a certain date, it needs to be passed to somebody else, right? And that stuck with me for such a long time, because I realized, oh man, in certain areas of my life, I have the freedom of choice to do what I want with that ball. But when we push off responsibility, we aren't even giving ourselves a chance to be a better person, because when you have the ball, you're able to do something with it. It's a basketball analogy as well. It's like, if I have the ball in my hand, I'm able to shoot, pass, drive, or turn it over. And you don't want to turn it over, but when you have the ball, you have the freedom to do something with it. So identify areas of your life where you're holding the ball and you're just kind of standing there. And if you don't realize that, then what you're going to end up doing is turning the ball over. And if you turn the ball over in certain areas of your life, that could be so detrimental to your relationship, to your job, to, your growth and things. And those are kind of the 3 buckets that we really talk about, on this podcast and fitness, is because you start to realize in a lot of areas in your life, you're actually holding the ball. That's your responsibility. If you have that mindset of I'm holding the ball with whatever this thing is, and I have the power to do something with it, you start to feel extremely, extremely powerful. You realize that you are a victor in a situation instead of a victim. That victim mentality is something that I struggle with a lot. I feel like growing up, my dad really had to talk me through it and kind of work it out of me, to get a little bit deeper. Growing up black in Northern Virginia, where it's predominantly white, where I grew up, and then moving to Singapore at a young age for 3 years and seeing so much diversity and being around so much diversity, and then moving back at the end of middle school and kind of being back into like very segmented. It was like, man, I felt like I was just the victim. I was like, I have to code switch in so many different rooms, and I have to act a certain way around certain people. I have to act less than around certain people just so I was accepted, and so on and so forth. And my dad he had told me this one thing that I'll never forget that I take with me to this day. He goes, so if you are in a room where you look different, the most superficial aspect, you look different. He's like, you automatically stand up. He was like, the victim's mentality is, I want to shut myself off and shut myself down because I stand out too much. The victor's mentality says, if you're already looking at me or you can pick me out of a crowd and you notice me, that's like, you have a leg up. He was like, son, you have a leg up because now you just work your craft. You do what you do. And because you look different, he's like, people are already noticing you. So that's the victor's mentality, and that's the ball that you're holding. Now, boom. Now you have responsibility with the eyes or people looking at you or whatever that you can do something with. Don't sit back and act like you don't have responsibility or turn the ball over because you're scared. Take that. So that's an area where for me, I was like, I have to notice that I'm holding the ball and I got to run with it. So find the areas in your life where you are doing that same thing too. Number 2, identify who or what is really impacting you. I kind of run through this quick, short example, and the reason being is because you want to identify the root cause and the common denominator, and typically it's you. So I have a dog, Winks. He's got one eye, really cute rescue dog. And when we first got him, he was 10 weeks old as a puppy, and he would just tear up books. And I'm like, man, like, why is this? He's tearing up books. And I'm like, it's his fault. He's tearing up books. But when I look at it, I was like, what's impacting me isn't necessarily the fact that he's doing this. It's the fact that I'm not making decisions or doing things that prevent him from doing this. He's a puppy. Why are the books so low that he can get to them? Why am I not providing the requisite discipline that if he does do that he's learning from it? And everything ended up pointing back to me. And that was a powerful situation because I was like, in this moment, some people just don't know what they don't know. Who or what is impacting you is sometimes out of your control, the full output, but you might have 10% of control or influence on it. With your 10%, you can do something. Now, would Winks never be able to get to a book or chew it up? Could sometimes I accidentally leave one lower, or could he do something different, hop up on something to get one, even though I've consciously made an action to move it? Yeah, that happens. But when you are starting to identify who and what is really, really impacting you, you start to see areas where a lot of it is pointed back to you. And that's a powerful thing because in order for you to be better, you can't be it's like being a nerve ending. Everything just bugs you and everything is, and it doesn't help because what you're doing is saying it's everybody else's fault. It's everybody else's responsibility without looking at it and saying, dang, in a lot of these areas, I'm actually kind of hurting myself because I'm not changing. I bring up a relationship aspect a lot because I just got engaged and I've been in a relationship for about 4 years and now a little over 4 years. And I've noticed so many areas where I was like, I want this to be better in the relationship. But then if I look back at everything, I'm like, oh, it's because I'm not doing X, Y, Z over here. So this over here isn't shaking the way that I want to. And then when I started doing those things, I realized these things started to shake over here. So when you really identify who and what's impacting you, more often than not, you'll realize how much control you have over it, which is a powerful, powerful thing. You'll see the root cause. Number 3, accept negative aspects. When you pick up the slack for things, right? When you take responsibility, oftentimes you're picking up slack for things that are not your fault. Picking up slack sometimes is heavy. But when you accept heaviness, it's an amazing thing. I'm listening to an audiobook by Ryan Halliday, and it's about discipline, but he was actually on a podcast with Jay Shetty where he said this thing actually this morning, and it was so impactful to me. So when you accept the negative aspects, like that's the point that we're getting at. He talked about a prisoner who basically went to some sort of concentration camp type of thing that I think he had like a 7-year sentence or something like that, and not rightful and everything. It was for some not good things that were going on in the world. But he said that the person, when he came out of it, he's like, my mind when I went into it was to fully accept that I could be tortured, that I could die, I might never get out. But full acceptance of that makes me realize that I'm just immersed in this. And if I do get out, I want to be able to be a better person. So I don't want this thing over here to kill me and make me a worse person if I do get out, but accepting everything that's going to come with it. Then he was also telling a story about how, soldiers in certain wars, when they're like, oh, we're going to be home by Christmas. He's like, the most optimistic person in those situations is typically the people who have the worst experiences or who die first. It's because they have an expectation that at a certain point in time, the pain is going to be relieved. And if it doesn't, then at that date where they thought the pain is going to be relieved, boom, done. And I see that when it comes to running, when I see that when it comes to anything else. If I'm like, I'm setting out to do 5 miles, if I run 5 miles and I'm with somebody and they're like, hey, let's do a 6, I'm like, that 6 mile, even though I might feel great, that's the worst one because I expected 5 and I set my mind up for 5. I didn't expect the additional. So when you accept the negative aspects, you realize, hey, I'm picking up the slack. And I might have to hold these heavy things. I might have to take responsibility for a longer time than I want to, but I'm just going to sit in it. And it's going to be what it is, and it just is what it is. And I've learned this so much with friends who had kids and stuff. And shout out to Mason, he's behind the camera. He's got 2 cute little boys, and we talk about kids all the time. I don't have kids yet, and hopefully, God willing, one day. But he talks about you're just kind of in it. You're in this basically like parental stage where you just are just in it, and it's going to end at some point in time, but you just want to appreciate the time that you have in it and embrace any sort of the discomfort, the lack of sleep, the increased responsibility. But when you embrace that, then you have an area to see the beauty of it and to be able to grow in it. So embrace all of the negative aspects that come with it. That's going to help you take more responsibility and be an overall better person. Now, number 4, do what you say that you're going to do. This is something that I struggled with in the past. I probably still, I struggle with it a little bit now, but less now. In the past, I used to say yes to everything and then severely, under deliver or just not deliver or just not really have my word as my bond type of thing. That showed up in, relationships in the past. That showed up in, I would say my work in the past. I can speak well. Like, this is what I feel like my God-given gift is to do. And I had a manager in one of my past jobs, and he was like, man, he goes, look, he's like, you speak so well. He's like, you are unbelievable. Like, you make clients feel great. You make everybody internally feel great. He's like, if you can match your output to how well you speak, he's like, you're unstoppable. And so for the past few years, that's what I've been focusing on. I'm like, okay, if I go and I say this, I am going to match the effort and take responsibility to do all the hard things so that my effort, my work output matches how I'm speaking. And I've seen so many dividends because of that. But make sure that you're doing what you say that you're going to do, because it also instills trust in other people. I think nowadays it's so easy for us we don't really live in like a word is bond society. We just kind of like, shoot from the hip, say what we want, keep it moving, and it is what it is. And that doesn't help closeness of relationships. That doesn't help you become a better person. That doesn't help, you getting the things that you truly want out of life, because you'll realize as you get older, those things depend on a network of people who love you, who care for you, who rely on you, and who also help feed you in certain areas. If you aren't doing what you say you're going to do, what's going to happen is those relationships are going to atrophy, they're going to weaken. And so you are not going to be able to be a better person, because a lot of times being a better person is because of the people you're surrounded by. I'm a better person because my fiance is in my life. I'm a better person because my family, my parents are in my life. I'm a better person because Mason's behind the camera and I watch how he handles his life with his kids and how he handles his profession, how he produces his podcast and everything. I'm become a better person because of those things. Now, the other thing is I focus on, I'm going to say what I'm going to do what I say. When I say I'm going to show up at this time and be here ready to work and be here ready to give my all on a podcast, that's what I'm going to do. Mason says he's going to show up. He shows up. Now, if I stop showing up and I stop giving my all, then Mason's going to start showing up 5 minutes, 10 minutes late, 30 minutes late. Because why? Because it doesn't make sense for him to show up for me if I'm not going to show up for myself, if I'm not going to show up for him and other people in my life. That's the cyclical nature of it. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, if you don't show up in certain areas, people are going to stop showing up for you. Those people are people who want to actively feed you, who want to help you be a better person, and who also give you a great example to how to be a better person. If I stop showing up, then I automatically think, oh, this person is not a good person to be around because they don't do X, Y, Z. But it's like, it's sort of with me. I'm just not worth their time showing up anymore. Do what you say you're going to do. It's going to strengthen your relationships. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to give you so much more responsibility and courage to take on what you know you want to take on. And it's going to help you be an overall better person. So to recap this whole thing, to be a better person, and then 4 tips for personal responsibility. 1, you're holding the ball. Recognize the areas in your life where you are holding the ball, where you have the control. Number 2, identify who and what is really impacting you. Try to tie it back to the root cause. Oftentimes, you're the common denominator, which means that the root cause may be you, which gives you the power to change things. Number 3, accept the negative aspects. When you are holding the ball, when you are picking up the slack, it can be a weighty thing. It might not always feel fun. It might not always feel good, but just accept that it is. And number 4, do what you say you're going to do. If you say that you have the ball and you're going to make a move and you're going to get to the basket and score, then do that. Walk through everything that you say you're going to do, win, lose, or draw. And I promise you, that as a practice is going to help you take on more responsibility. You're going to feel more confident to take on more responsibility because you're going to feel confident that you can really have a better output and have better relationships. And that is really what we want to do as humans: have better output, help more people, have better relationships, and have a deeper faith. So those things, I promise, will help you out. Now, getting into our word of the day, it's easy. It's just responsibility. It's your ability to respond. That's it. If you think of responsibility, you can write it down: my ability to respond. I have had tough work weeks. And in those tough work weeks, I legitimately think of 2 things: my ability to respond to negative situations, and then also something my therapist and I talked about ad nauseum is making sure that the negative neurons don't sync together. So basically, if there's something that happens and I want to react a certain way because the neurons are firing, but then I don't take an action, I give it space to respond. Instead of react, I respond so that it doesn't sync to every time this stimulus hits, I do this negative thing. It's every time this stimulus hits, I wait, I can take responsibility in my response, and then I can make sure that the neurons don't sync so that they weaken the negative responses. So take responsibility. You can do it. I know that you can. Not everything is going to be easy. Growth isn't supposed to be easy. Growth is supposed to be tough from time to time. Being honest with ourselves, being honest with our partner, being honest with where we're at in life. That's a tough thing. I'm not saying that it's easy. I would never get on here and just straight blatantly lie and say, oh, this is sunshine and rainbows. It's not. I'm not going to be that type of podcast. I'm going to say some stuff. You just have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not good at this, and I want to be better here. And this is what it's going to take. And at all costs, I have to do that. And it's going to hurt, but it's going to make me better. And if you think long term, and if you don't think what feels good for today, that's going to help. So I hope that this podcast episode helped you out. If it did, like, comment, share, send a carrier pigeon, do whatever you have to do. We appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you all so much for watching the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, send it to friends, use a carrier pigeon, do whatever you have to do. We hope that this inspires you to chase your greater vision in your life and for us to continually and consistently do it together.